Hi, everyone. We hope you guys are having a great day out there. Thank you so much for joining us today. It is Mr. Tiska with you once again. And once again, I'm joined by Mrs. Kraft. Mrs. Kraft, how are you today?
I am great. And yourself?
I'm fantastic. And we also have Miss Hoff with us. Miss Hoff, how are you?
I'm excellent. Ready to go.
Awesome. So today we're going to be learning about Chapter 14, Section 4, the movement to end slavery. The big idea for today is that in the mid-1800s, debate over slavery increased as abolitionists organized to challenge slavery in the United States.
And the main ideas that we're going to talk about are Americans from a variety of different backgrounds actively opposed slavery. Abolitionists organized the Underground Railroad to help enslaved Africans escape. And despite efforts of abolitionists, many Americans remained opposed to ending slavery. Main idea number 1, Americans from a variety of backgrounds actively opposed slavery.
So the idea of being against slavery was not new. I mean, it went back to Ben Franklin. He was the very first president of a society called the Pennsylvania Society for Promoting the Abolition of Slavery. So for as long as you could remember in time, Americans were not all in favor of having slaves. Think back to the Quakers that first founded Pennsylvania. They came in and they treated the Native Americans with kindness because in their opinion, everyone was equal in God's eyes. So there's lots of people that were against slavery. Now, not everybody believed that eliminating slavery meant that people that were slaves should have full equality. Some people wanted to actually send the freed slaves back to Africa where they came from. And to that end, America sent 12,000 African Americans to a place called Liberia in Africa. And lots of people posted, and well, we say posted now, but they wrote about it, of being against slavery. A man named William Lloyd Garrison actually published a newspaper called The Liberator, which was anti-slavery. This next group of girls, these two sisters, is a little bit unusual because they were actually from the South. Angelina and Sarah Grimke were white Southern women who spoke out against slavery, and they tried to get other Southern women to also stop slavery. One of the more well-known men is Frederick Douglass. He himself was an escaped slave who gave speeches about abolition. And he wrote autobiographies to describe what the conditions of slavery were like to try to make people aware of it. And then there's a woman named Sojourner Truth, who was not named Sojourner Truth at birth. She took on the name because she wanted to spread the true word. And she herself gave speeches, and she not only supported abolition, but she also fought hard for women's rights. Now, she is not the most famous of the women. There's another woman that you're going to hear about next from Mr. Tiska that everybody knows, and she's my hero because she's going to replace he who shall not be named on the $20 bill.
Main idea number 2, abolitionists organized the Underground Railroad to help enslaved Africans escape.
Yeah, so one of the common mistakes that students normally make is when they hear Underground Railroad, they instantly think of trains and railroad tracks. The Underground Railroad was actually a secret network of people who arranged transportation and hiding places for fugitives or escaped slaves. And Ms. Hoff's going to pan over to a picture real quick, and we're going to show you a little bit about what the Underground Railroad actually looks like. So you can see here, you see all those red arrows. So the Underground Railroad is just basically a network of people and pathways to the north that slaves would take in secret to try and escape slavery in the South. And usually, more often than not, most of these slaves actually ended up going as far north as Canada. So escaped slaves and fugitives actually followed the freedom trails to the north at night, and they were led by conductors who would help them to the next hiding place. And the beautiful thing about the Underground Railroad is if you were trying to escape slavery, the person that you would go to, the first conductor you would meet, would only know the location of the next conductor. They wouldn't necessarily know where you would go after that. That is in order to protect the secrecy of the Underground Railroad and to keep it functional so slaves could escape. Now, the most famous conductor, who Mrs. Craft mentioned before, was a woman by the name of Harriet Tubman, who was an escaped slave herself. She used the Underground Railroad to escape. Now, if it were you or if it were me, that would be good enough for us, just getting our freedom. But she actually made 19 trips on the Underground Railroad and rescued 300 slaves. Let me say that again. Rescued 300 slaves, including her entire family. She was so good at it, and she was such a thorn in the side of white Southerners that eventually there was a $40,000 reward for her capture. So there's a reason why Mrs. Craft is saying that, she should end up on the $20 bill one day because of all the good things that she did, especially for escaped slaves.
Wow. Main idea number 3, despite efforts of abolitionists, many Americans remain opposed to ending slavery. So many white Northerners agreed with the South and supported slavery. Remember, these Northerners were afraid that freed slaves would take their jobs and drive wages down so they wouldn't get paid as much because they didn't have to pay the slaves. Abolitionists were threatened and even killed by angry mobs, people who were against the ending of slavery. The House of Representatives used a gag rule which prevented congressmen from discussing anti-slavery petitions. This was a violation of the First Amendment, and John Quincy Adams was eventually able to overturn this rule. Many white Southerners believed that slaves were a vital part of their economy and culture, and outsiders should not interfere with their way of life. Because remember, these people kept their plantations running and made the money. Nat Turner's rebellion made all open talks about slavery in the South disappear, and many Southern abolitionists, like the Grimke sisters, like Mrs. Craft talked about earlier, left the South rather than saying anything against slavery.
And I believe that is it for us today, although I do want to add one more thing about the Underground Railroad. So a lot of students, they ask me, they say, well, Mr. Tiska, where did these slaves hide? Actually, when they went to these different locations on the Underground Railroad, certain locations would have secret compartments in the wall where slaves would hide, or in the floor where they could hide underneath the floor. So those were just two places in which slaves would normally hide while they were traveling on the Underground Railroad.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Mrs. Craft, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I just want to say that there was a lot of people that were very brave that were part of the Underground Railroad because they knew that they were risking their own lives by helping those others.
Yeah, and if they were caught, most likely they would be executed along with the slaves who were trying to escape. So they were taking, a huge risk by trying to help out these people. Ms. Hoff, anything else you want to add?
Nope, I think you guys got it all.
Okay, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.